Good morning. This is Pops. Thoughts came to mind as I was watching one of those short videos on Instagram. A tree was leaning into a tree, and the dude cut down the tree that was solid, didn't pay attention to the other one. He cut it, it started to fall. The other tree hung there for a brief second, started, and then came right at him. He's standing there watching the tree that's falling. There's no limbs on heart. The one has a large limb, but it's one of those things where something could have been dislodged and hit him anyway, but the moron didn't watch the tree, the second tree, and it came down straight in his direction. Rather than moving, there are two things you do. One is run or walk, because he had probably plenty of time the way it looked. And the other one is throw the chainsaw and run. But he did this in a panic. So I want to have a safety talk today about a lot of things that people think are necessary. Two things came to mind during this video. First is I want to tell you a story, because back in the 90s I went to a class on airbags. I was in the ambulance squad, and there was a lot of stuff that was, well, you got to work with a fire department. Well, you have to know what their language is, what they're talking about, and what they're working with, how they're going to attack it. So I went to a vehicle extrication type of class. And the one that was on later on was an update on airbags with a GM engineer that was at GM when they were putting airbags in the cars. And of course, as always, Chuck U. Schumer, the most worthless human being in the Senate, just 0.001% above Mitch the Maggot McConnell, the turtle, had pushed for airbags, and GM and other companies said, we don't have them finalized yet. And Schumer pushed, get them in the cars, or tell them it's for the people's safety. He says, well, eventually it might be, but he says, there's a lot of other concerns other than the airbag. And then, no, we want the airbag now. Well, that's back when Chuck Hughes started that. He does his own commercial, and at the end of the commercial says, pulls his glasses off, and I approve. I'm Chuck Schumer, and I approve this message. And he looked like a wild-eyed lunatic, ready to eat your liver. But people down in the city are like, oh, he means business. We like that. He's decisive. That's what those morons think. And you say, well, now you're into the political. I am. Why? Because airbags are political. All of them. Why? When the GM guy put them in there and they said they had to come out at 300, the stuff that happened was mandated by Congress to kill people. I'm serious. I was there in the class with the engineer that was there working on this stuff at GM. He said, no, literally, we told them, we're not there yet. These are going to kill people. More than they'll help. And Schumer says it's for their safety. We don't care. They put them in. They said, what do you mean? Well, Grandpa's going to be here. Grandpa needs to turn the airbag off. Grandpa's going to hit a padded steering wheel and be in better shape than that airbag will ever help him. I said, why? He said, because the airbag came out at the force Congress demanded would blow him out the rear window. And they had evidence of it. He said, well, that's just in your testing. He said, yeah! Physics, man! Nope, but Schumer forced the issue. So they got airbags. It was a sad day in the world, and you're saying, no, wait a minute, airbags save lives. Some. Even today, they turn it off on the passenger side if you're below a certain weight. Duh. Airbags kill as many as they help even today. And you say, no, wait a minute. Yep, I'm sure it has saved somebody's life. Seatbelts, when they first came out, suddenly they became mandated. Why? It's for your safety. We're going to get ahead of this and protect you. No, you're not supposed to protect us here. That's us, the free market, the people. You have to protect us out there at the border, literally, even then at the borders in the 60s. We were having the trouble then. They didn't care. Not their problem. We're going to protect you from yourself. We'll regulate you into existence. No, you won't. They harmed as many people as they helped. And I said, yeah, so? So what? It broke your pelvis and you can't walk straight anymore. And the rest of your life is maimed and in danger from it. It's not our problem. We protected you from dying. Actually, no, they didn't. The original seat belts kept you from hitting full force and crushing your chest and everything else. It did. You say, well, that helped. No, because it made a cantilever. Your face went into this hardened, even padded steering wheel. Snapped people's necks. Please. Crushed their faces. I mean, that was... You just sat there, what? Well, we prevented them from being ejected out the front window. We killed them a different way. We'll take care of ourselves. Seatbelts were an option. Seatbelts were demanded. Seatbelts were put in, and suddenly seatbelts became mandatory to wear. And they had traffic stops in New York for it. Till the people howled. They had traffic stops everywhere looking for that tax. Yeah, that's one of the biggest things in New York is taxing the working people. Not the thugs, not the thieves, not the outlaws, but taxing the working people and saying it's for your safety. And when that didn't work, it's for your children's safety. We survived just fine without child care seats. Well, yeah, but there's always an instance where somebody does something that saved a little kid's life. Now, mind you, driving down the highway at 70 miles an hour and the little one's sitting in mommy's lap, and all of a sudden somebody pulls out in front and crash. Little one is going to go into the windshield. Maybe not through it, but definitely into it, and they're dead. We know that. That's a choice they make. Excuse me. It's probably not going to be the only one, just to warn you. So safety can be an issue, but it's the parents, it's the people make those decisions. No, they don't. So they put shoulder harnesses on there, and then people started breaking shoulders and having other trouble. It never stopped. So now you've got a lap belt, a shoulder belt, and an airbag. Well, the seat belts are there to hold you in position, so the airbag can smash you in the face. Airbag, I like that. Now they trying to put them in the seat backs and found out that you pad the seat, they'll be fine. Seat belts in buses, the curse of the universe. High back seats so you can't see what's going on. We're protecting the children. You're only protecting the children in an accident, which is rare with a school bus. Well, not as rare as you think. Oh no, it's rare. And the high back seats help no one. In fact, the general operation of the bus, the seat belts and high back seat are a curse to both discipline and the general activities on the bus. Well, tell me they're not, because the kids can hide back there and do all kinds of felonious things. Nothing the bus driver can do except get in trouble for allowing the felonious things they can't see or monitor on the bus. Kids getting beat up, abused, sexual activities. Oh yeah, don't tell me I was a bus driver. I know what used to happen on my route. I know what stopped on my route too. So anyway, I go through all of this until we get to the chainsaw with the guy with the trees, right? The jackass. It's like, no, get out of the way, you moron. You hit a full 2 seconds. That's even enough for this fat old guy to get out of the way, please. What? 1001, 1002, you're out of the way. 3 or 4 steps, he's gone. If he trips, well, he break a leg, but he survived. Please. He wasn't wearing a helmet. That was one of the first comments. So I sent back, I'm glad you weren't around when I was first in chainsaws, because that's just absurd. Why? I was there when chain brakes came out. The first chain brakes that came out were on Mini Mac McCullochs all over the place. And they said the average force to trigger the chain brake on that Mini Mac McCulloch could break your wrists if the saw had enough power. Yep, they would have been better off if they had the wrap or the half wrap handle with a bar in front of it, so when it kicked back, it hit your wrist, then your forearm. That would have been better than the chain brake, because that's all it was. It was a big wide handle, and when you went to engage the chain brake, you had to have 2 hands. You couldn't just give it a pop, and there it is. They were deadly and dangerous and heavy. But the feds were impressed. Yes, they were. Well, McCulloch was on a campaign with Black & Decker to save their lives, and they built the cheapest, sleaziest, worst chainsaws in the history of humanity. Coming from a company, McCulloch, if you listen to Buck and Billy Ray, which isn't far off, McCulloch used to build the top saw in the entire world. Mm-hmm. They were legend when I was a child. The only way they weren't legend was steel came in and started walking all over everybody. Why? Because they were lighter. They had similar power, but the big McCullochs, you always heard about the McCullochs up there in the redwoods. Why? Because you could put a 4 or 5 or they didn't measure in inches. It was a 4 or 5 or 6 foot bar somebody was running. The old McCulloch down through the woods. The end of the day, what? Can't hear you. But it had torque. Oh yeah. 1010 McCulloch, another legend, and it was so legend to try and save their bacon before they went totally belly up that even Black & Decker couldn't save them with their cheap, fast, and hardware store stuff. They brought back the 1010. What an animal. Oh, somebody just sent me a message. What was it? Somebody mentioned me. Oh, yeah, it's about New Holland and Fiat. New Holland did something, and I said, somebody asked about a color on a machine. I said, somebody ought to talk to Tony and tell him fix it again. Anyway, it's an ag joke. Anyway, when we get into the safety factors on this, I've been told many years that I was irresponsible for not wearing chaps. And some kid sat there and said, what, you want those chaps that are like a skirt? And I looked at him and said, yeah, jackass, because I overheat too easily. And if you put the pants on that never fit me anyway and I overheat, what's the point? I'll only be able to work for a few minutes and then have to stop. I need something that the air flows to keep me cool this time of year. I'll try the chaps first. And if it's worth it, then I'll go to the pants. Well, it's not even. I said, shut up, kid, and sell me the pants. Or the chaps. I've had a lot of people talk about not wearing chaps, and you know what the funny part about it is? If you wear everything for safety that they want you to, it's going to be difficult to actually safely cut the wood. You have cut-resistant gloves, that's heat retention. You'll have cut-resistant shirt, heat retention. You'll have the helmet on, which in certain circumstances is a wind tunnel for chips to come up in your face. So now you have to wear safety glasses with a helmet with a face shield. Please. Now you're handing a saw that probably weighs 1.5 pounds heavier than it needs to for a chain brake. Well, that's not much. No, it's not. But still, you got a chain brake on there. That you know what I love about a chain brake though? When I'm done cutting and I don't want to shut the saw off, I snap the chain brake on. So even if something pops or bucks or whatever, the chain doesn't move, it can't. Saw sits there and idles. And if something bad happens with me and I fall on the saw, it doesn't matter. Chain brake's on. You're walking through the woods with your saw, you put the chain brake on. You fall and accidentally hit the trigger when you're down there because you're falling and you're trying to grip the handle to help. Nothing happens. Just the saw speeds up. Chain stays there. So I do have like chain brakes in part. Not overall, but in part. I like their existence. It's kind of handy. You don't have to restart the saw. You don't have to pull on it. You don't have to worry about the chain spinning while you're. Yeah. And it also requires maintenance. Not much, just clean. So there are uses for it, but this guy, the chain brake wouldn't help him. Chaps wasn't going to help him. And in fact, the gloves and any other cut resistant or whatever, it's not going to help him. None of it. In fact, if he had a helmet with a face shield and goggles or safety glasses, he would not have seen the other falling tree and it would have killed him on the spot. He wouldn't have even done this because he wouldn't have been able to see it. 2 reasons. One of them is he wouldn't be able to see it. It would have been out of his field of vision. And he only would have seen maybe the bottom part of the tree moving. Well, it'd have to move a long way to scare you, wouldn't it? And when it's coming directly at you and you're looking at the base, it's not moving very fast. And then you look at the top that's now at 45 degrees. You don't have those 2 seconds anymore. Safety is a thing that's chosen for a reason, but there's 2 things that in the saw shops that I used to say, and the fellow I worked with, Tracy, what was his name? Tracy? Yeah, it wasn't Daly. What the heck was it? Yeah, maybe it was Tracy Daly. It was he lived in Schoharie, New York years ago. And one of the things we used to tell the customers consistently was chain brakes don't help anyone. If you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get hurt. Chain brake notwithstanding. And say, well, at the time it wasn't inertia. Well, no, actually, it was more annoying than inertia. It did come on by inertia. You didn't know when it was going to or not. But it was there. If something kicked up, it hit the paddle and flopped down. But because it was a friction link, it wasn't consistent. But it did work very well in the steel chainsaws. Very well. In fact, they built in a gap so that the paddle could move a slight bit, not do anything. But the momentum of the paddle would hit and cause the thing to slide. So it would even make it more sensitive to a certain point, where if you did hit something, snap, it instantly pops off and the bar doesn't even come up out of the wood. So even Steel's originals were very good. Well, I say originals at that time period. They had one prior. It had a clutch. It wasn't much of a clutch, but it had a hub on the chain clutch. So that when the chain brake came on, they took the weights and pulled them off the chain drum. They did. They took the actual clutch shoes and pulled them back together. Declutched it. Well, to stop it, but you're talking 2 pounds and taking it on and off, and it was a trial, but there were some people that paid for it. A little old 20 Steels screaming 12, 14, 15,000 RPM. They liked it a lot. But they were expensive. You're talking a saw that was in the time period when people were buying brand new saws, large saws for $350, $400, $500. Here you are with a little 2 cubic inch lemon saw that cost $350 plus, $400. But you could get that chain brake on there. There's a lot of stuff that Steel did way back before they had the mandates and everything else with it because of Germany. But the chain brake helped no one, and that guy that was walking away from the tree, if he'd have been smart, the chain brake was already engaged. So what would that have done for him? Nothing. Come to the factor where you're trying to tell someone that the helmet and a tree coming down on top of you with probably 3 tons of force. Tree didn't weigh that much. No, but the tree coming down like this from 40 plus 50 feet in the air, the momentum, the energy. Oh, yeah. It's coming, baby. What do they call it? Kinetic energy until it gets you? Energy transfer. Dead. Squashed. Crunched. Destroyed. Demolished. Hamburglarized. I mean, he's dead. It didn't matter how much safety equipment he had on. And the idea of having a helmet to protect his head. Not just fracture his neck, but you can identify his face while he's laying there. Can't breathe. And he's stuck in that position when you come to pick up the what's left of the corpse. Trying to breathe. Just saying. Break the neck. The only thing that's connected is this. People are so insane about the things that they pop off on. I'm just curious. Well, how far is this going to go? I just alluded to you all the different ways that you can have all the safety stuff in the world and cutting with a chainsaw, and it's no good. One of the things you do is if you put all the safety equipment on, the only people that will be able to go out and cut wood are young people that can handle the excess heat. The experienced people that generally know better, A, they don't need the equipment near as much equipment, and B, they have an idea of what they're looking for. So prevention is the biggest part of an old guy. Why? Because you just can't run when you make the screw up anymore. Even the old guys that are in great shape, you got those 30-pound boots you're carrying around. And a chainsaw, I mean, that's your life. You're not going to give up that saw that easy. So now you got all the gear that you're carrying with you, plus your saw. You're running around with 50 extra pounds of stuff. You ain't running out of the way anymore unless you can throw it. I mean, I just sit here and if you watch the loggers out there, they wear helmets because they have to. But then when they look up, they have to look up farther than they normally would. The only ones that I wear with any type of consistency is I like leather gloves working out in the woods. Not even insulated. You lose touch. You don't get the feel. The saw feels different when it gets dull. It feels different when it hits something in the wood. It's just, you lose that. And the other one is safety glasses, because the wind will whip those chips up and put them right in your face. They're going that way. No, they're not anymore. They spin up and around and go right up in your face, especially if you're wearing a visored hat to keep the sun out of you. And yes, the visor hat's a problem because I have to look up further. But the visor hat doesn't have all the stuff around it either. So when I'm watching a tree, I don't have to look all the way up. With a visored hat, I have better peripheral vision. And it helps considerable. But in the wintertime, not very often I'm wearing a visor hat. It's usually safety glasses. Just keep crap out of my eyes so I know when to run. Someday people will learn that there is only so much you can do. There's only so much care you can give. There's only so much that can actually happen in the world. And it's a decision that a person makes themselves, how they are and what they do. And sometimes you just don't know. You go out there and you're cutting a tree down, you're guesstimating. Literally. The trees leaning like this. I've seen too many of them barber chair, as they call it. Why do they call it barber chair? Because when it breaks, the only thing that's left on the stump is this big spire. Looks like a barber chair to some people. Well, whatever. They have a different way of cutting them down. They know it. I do now. I didn't then. I used to just fire the saw up and go as fast as I could through the wood. Didn't get much of a barber chair usually. Zoop, down we go. But once in a while, it happens. Go out there in the wind. You shouldn't be cutting trees out there. No, but that's the only time I got, so I go cut trees. Barber chair now and then because the wind blows it before I can get it cut all the way through. Stuff happens. And then you figure out how to get it on the ground safely. Sometimes just throw a chain over it and pull it with a tractor. Other times you figure out how to cut it so that it falls in a particular direction that you want, as safely as possible. That's just what you do. You get over yourself and you do the thinking. You get over watching somebody else and ordering their life. That's hard for the leftists to think about, and you narcissists. You're not always right, especially if you're a narcissist. You're usually wrong. But that's why you make the statement, so you stand out. It's a different world than what I grew up in, and personal responsibility. We didn't have the electronics on the tractor, roll bars, and all this other stuff that are on them. Unfortunately, we didn't even have brakes on some tractors. We still figured our way around safely. I can't imagine today if there's any employee on the farm that the feds don't come in and get after them. Anybody can report anybody for anything, and the farmer may have made a financial choice that isn't safe, but it's his choice to make, not yours. You make the decision. You either keep working or you go somewhere else. Same thing with logging out in the woods. One guy sat there and made the comment that I'll only square grind chain. Anybody who uses anything other than square grind is insane. What in the world? Really? And then I listen to the professionals and they all say the same thing. Square grind's a better chain, faster, etc., everything else. And to a man, the 5 or 6 that I've listened to all the way down the line say the same thing. It does make a difference. Bucking. Tree felling didn't make hardly any difference at all for them. Bucking, though, 25% faster. Well, if you're trying to get limb and bucking and you're trying to get stuff out of the woods, that's significant. But felling a tree, the first thing in the mind is keeping the chain sharp and watching what you're doing. Because you can be cutting a tree, and as it starts to fall, you can't see, in their case, 100 feet in the air, 200 feet in the air, maybe 300 feet in the air. And as the tree starts to fall, it may break off its limbs because they're trapped in other trees, or break off their limbs and send them right to you. You're looking, it's over there, 100 feet, that limb that broke off. It comes down and then swings around and comes right back at you. You don't know how it's tied up there. And there's nothing in the world that can prevent any of that. They have to know what they're doing. It's a dangerous world. But still, to hear the absolutes, I'll only and you should never. Anytime somebody does that, just send back the laughy faces. And ROFLOL, the absoluters. This is the only way. You can't do, and that's like that little jackass up there, Power and Paddle. Those are like a woman wearing a skirt. What do you want those for? I said, because, jackass, I overheat very easily and always have. I said, so I know what I want and need. You don't. Well, yeah, but shut up and sell me the britches. And somebody said, well, you were mean to him. No, I told him the facts and told him to shut up. He was a dumb little disrespectful punk that had no... Let's put it this way. Prior to that, he told me which chainsaw I had to buy. And I looked at him and said, no. It's more power. It's a cheaper... Yeah, it's a cheaper saw. Thank you. What do you mean? So I turned his saw over and I said, take a look. What do you see? Oh, everything's made of plastic. That's not what I said. What do you see down in there? Where's the engine? What? Where's the engine? Well, it's in the case, exactly. That's a weed trimmer motor in a plastic case. Not that it's bad. It's not what I want. And I pulled out an MS-270 and turned it over, and I said, look down there under the handle strap. What do you see? Oh, you tell me. I said, I see magnesium. Painted magnesium. Thank you. I'll take a 270. Plastic and aluminum? Magnesium. 20-inch bar, chisel chains, one chisel chain and one round semi-chisel. Nobody went now. And years later, the 270 is still out there running, and I may have put one carburetor kit in it. Maybe in almost 20 years. Please. That's why I get on to these people that they know it all, and this is what you should buy because you're buying. Stop it. I like this one. You're paying more. No, they didn't have the profit margin. Thank you. Unfortunately for me, after that, and this is just my personal story that irks me, but the 271 became the 291. They just put a smaller cylinder on it. And then the 311, and then the 361 and 391, a whole series of 4 or 5 saws that were all together almost became identical. The 270 magnesium was gone. And I am so thankful that I bought the last saw. It'll never be worth anything to anybody else, but it sure is to me. Why? I got 20 years of phenomenal service. Guys are sending their 291s in to be repaired constantly. Now I have a 311. That may end up with that problem later too. It's a weed trimmer, aluminum and plastic, but that's all you can buy at this point, unless you want to spend $1,000. And that's the other thing. People do not know what you want. Study it. Learn about it. And then when you're in the woods also, the secret to all of this is what we used to say years ago. You need a sharp mind and a sharp chain. There's nothing else that's going to save you. I didn't say that enough throughout this, but that is the truth of everything, and with chainsaw related. A sharp mind and a sharp chain. Anything else will get you into trouble. You need the sharp mind to go through your steps. They like to call it muscle memory now. Well, it's thinking memory. Go through the steps automatically, that when you're cutting, what you're cutting, where you're cutting, watch what you're doing, the angle of the face cut, and where you're cutting your back cut coming through at the time. Do you leave a hanger before you get it hinged? Or do you just cut straight through? You make all those choices. Do you have an open notch, a closed notch? Do you have a Humboldt? Do you have a modified Humboldt? There's a lot of those things that you can get into that the loggers do on larger trees that we'll never do down here in the smaller trees. Do you also do the controlled fall that has basically like a cantilever, a stick into a middle of a groove where they actually spend the time to cut it out so when the tree falls, it can't hop and go some one direction or the other. I think it's crazy, but at watching it work, it's cool. But you still have to make your notch and now 2 back cuts. It's just a different world. People do things in different ways for particular reasons. I watched one guy gripe, scream, and yell at an arborist who had an open face cut. Massive. It was pretty cool. Nobody ever cuts an open face like that. Yeah, I've seen it before. We don't do it in the woods because we don't need to. that he has a control hinge almost the entire way down. He's controlling where it falls more than we do. Loggers out in the woods, we don't care, and we want it to snap off early so there's enough force to get the tree down through the limbs. You're sending the thing out on somebody's lawn and you're trying to be as accurate as you can to avoid other obstacles, and you don't need to climb, you don't climb. Then he left an open face and excellent control all the way down. Some guys cut below a notch. It's stupid, but they do, and it works. Some cut at an angle down to the notch. I do. Quite often the smaller trees. Why? So I have room for the bar and a wedge. I can take a little bitty tree that's under a foot, make a small notch on one side, start cutting at an angle down towards the hinge, put my little block in there, or wedge in there, so it doesn't fall back if it happens to, and keep right in cutting down, and then give it a shove, and over it goes. And sometimes just putting that little pressure on the wedge in the back is what pushes the tree over nice and easily, and then whack off the stump. Why not? Excuse me, some little trees, just for the fun of it, will in the front and then do an angled from the back, so when it falls back, it has something to hit. Then I shove it over. Some of them I don't even give it the little I just bring it down almost to there. It goes clunk, and it's a small tree, so I just shove it over. And it follows the hinge. Not greatly. It doesn't have to anymore. I don't care. But it has a safety factor built in for me. I can't see which way it's weighted. Too many little trees in here. And doing the normal notching doesn't work. It doesn't do any good. So I push it over. That's dangerous. I could fall back on it. Yeah. 150 pounds of tree that I can... Please. People have too many personal opinions that everybody should follow anymore. Walk away, please. And remember, a sharp mind and a sharp chain are your key to survival in the woods. It doesn't matter how much safety equipment you have if you do something stupid in the first place. That's just there to cut the injury down, literally.